Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Tilly, a trend forecaster at the Future Laboratory, and I'm delighted to be taking over Selfridges Social today as part of Project Earth and share with you some of the latest and greatest trends we're seeing in fashion. To help me do that, I'm going to be joined by some amazing panelists, each helping to make fashion more sustainable for us all. First, we're going to be joined by Victoria Prue, co-founder and CEO of Rental Network, her collective. Before we catch up with Natasha Fernandez, who is the designer and founder of the extremely coveted and often sold out Roop bags. And last but not least, we'll be talking all things vintage with Johnny O'Kane of Collate and one of the latest vendors in the Selfridges corner shop. So without further ado, hello, Victoria Prue. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
No worries. So glad you could join us today. So we are going to get on to some more trend and sustainability focused questions shortly. But firstly, could you tell us all a little bit about her collective?
Of course. So I co-founded her 3.5 years ago, and we built the platform to be as functional as Airbnb and basically allow women to share their wardrobe safely and securely. We now have users all across the UK doing just that, and we're on a mission to make A, renting an everyday occurrence, and B, fashion more sustainable.
So you said, you started the brand 3 years ago, sorry?
Exactly, yeah, just over 3 years ago.
Amazing. And so we've been writing about rental fashion since 2009. And, over 10 years later, it's become so much more widely known. We've seen it in co-working spaces, luxury hotels, and now we have it here at Selfridges. Can you tell us more about the pop-up and about that move into stores?
Yeah, exactly. So exactly like you say, I'm a millennial myself. I rent my car, I rent my house, and why not our wardrobes? So what you'll find in Selfridges on the third floor in the London branch is a curated edit from some of our top peer-to-peer lenders and their wardrobes. You'll find celebrity wardrobes in, as well as loads of amazing brand stock. So super exciting. We have about 150 to 200 pieces that are really curated. We change the shop floor really, really frequently as well. And we provide the Selfridges shopper with a rental option. So for the pieces that they're looking to access without the commitment to own, we provide just that.
Amazing. And so, as we spoke about the early examples of rental fashion, they were hyper focused on evening and occasion wear. And now, as it's gone on, we're seeing more of these mid-range and even high street kind of brands become available to rent. Where does her collective sit within that?
So hers absolutely not an occasion wear driven business. We want renting to be part of someone's everyday behaviour. And we have a term that we use called mini moments. And it's all about elevating the everyday for us. So most of our community, they rent for those mini moments, such as a new job interview, a picnic in a park, a staycation, a date night, and just accessing, say, a top at, being able to rent it at a fast fashion price, but it's actually a luxury piece. For 4 days or 8 days, and basically being able to access amazing pieces without that commitment to own. So part of my personal mission is trying to get people to rent much more frequently and take renting kind of as a mindset shift away from something that people just think of for those kind of high days and holidays, because it's much more everyday for us.
Absolutely. And I think showing people that there is a sustainable way to integrate rental into their everyday wardrobe is key, and sustainability in itself is a shift that we've seen move from a trend into this larger, more impactful movement. How else, is her collective working to make fashion more sustainable?
So we are an inherently circular economy business. Our mission is to extend the lifespan of clothes that already exist, but we've also thought about every part of that rental process, from the dry cleaning to the delivery to the packaging. We have an amazing partnership with a company that I know Selfridges love too, called Repack. And you can use a Repack up to 25 rentals, so they can go back and forth, and it means that we don't have to package up and use any kind of plastic in that process. And we've also really thought about how we can calculate the carbon emissions that we're doing throughout the rental process. And we've been working with an amazing company called Kogo, and actually basically calculated as of a couple of weeks ago that we've managed to save 8,000 trees being cut down and save the equivalent of 1.2 million miles being driven in a car since her was first founded. So it's really important for us that we think about renting, exactly like you say, as an entire process rather than just the dress, because it's so much more. and we want to be able to provide a sustainable solution at every part of that process.
And with consumers, I think another thing that has come with the increase in sustainability is this concept of greenwashing and purpose washing. And I think having the logistics and even down to the delivery and the cleaning is something that consumers are so much more savvy to now. And do you think that, I suppose, is this something that you hope consumers will become more savvy to with other businesses, and that something they will look towards when they're buying from, whether it be renting or fast fashion? Do you think that that could be something that we could look to see?
For sure. I think sustainability, as we know, is all encompassing. It doesn't just matter with one supply chain or one product. And for me, the most interesting area is dry cleaning. The dry cleaning industry is an industry that the consumer doesn't know much about, but that's really, really polluting to our environment. So I guess my hope for the future of fashion would be that everyone looked at all parts of it, from washing their clothes and actually dry cleaning them through to actually purchasing, because actually keeping the clothes that we buy and caring for them is as important as that point of purchase, for sure.
Definitely. I suppose there's a lot of it is on the education, and the question's always arisen, does it fall on the consumer or the brand to do that? And I think partnerships like Project Earth is kind of everyone going into that, I suppose, together, really. My next question is, so in 2019, I really want to talk about the community that you've kind of created with this, because we launched a macro trend in 2019 and we called it community commerce. And this looked at the innovative ways in which shoppers were accessing and exchanging all of their products. And as you said, the fashion rental model in itself is inherently circular, because we're always sharing across and each product has its own journey. But your network is slightly different in that you have borrowers and lenders, and that's really pushed community into the focus there. Why was that really important for you to create?
Exactly. So the vast majority of our business is peer-to-peer. So we're actually empowering people to make money from their wardrobes. And then on the other side, people can access an amazing, say, £500 dress for 20% of the RRP or the retail value. And that community element is absolutely crucial to our model. They are very much the beating heart of her, as we call them. And a bit like Airbnb, where people speak a lot before they put through a transaction, it's exactly the same on her. So our users will connect and ask each other questions about the style or the fit, about what they wore with that item. And it's really nice, that kind of community element where, say, I rent one item from Lizzie in Birmingham and I love her style and her wardrobe. And we now know that I will then go on to rent much more and many more items from Lizzie. So that community element is absolutely crucial. And it means that anyone across the UK can access our service and also be part of sustainability. It's the number one reason people signed up for our service, because they're looking for a smarter way to shop.
Absolutely. And did that engagement come as a surprise for you when you created the network?
I think I'd always hoped that it would be as engaging as it is, and our users find it. It's taken us a while to get there, because trust and security and the kind of tech side of our platform is absolutely crucial. But we've got there, and we see thousands of messages go through the platform very, very regularly. So it's great to see actually in real life, people communicating and I guess be part of this shared mission to pave a way for a more sustainable future for fashion.
Of course, and we talk about that sustainable future, and we said in the beginning how this trend's changed, and Her Collective, I've seen, you're now in stores, you're online, and what do you hope for the future of rental revolution, and what do you hope for Her Collective?
So our number one mission, and the reason I get out of bed every morning, is to make renting an everyday occurrence and genuinely change behaviours and shift those mindsets. Renting in the UK is still a very new concept. The large majority of people, we want to hold their hand and take them through that first purchase, show them, particularly with our self-judge pop-up and having that physical presence. It's really, really crucial for us that we can change those behaviours. So I hope that renting is going to become an everyday occurrence and become a mainstream way to consume fashion. And B, it's a lot about the educational piece and showing people that renting is super easy, it's fun, it's frictionless, and it's making fashion a better industry.
Absolutely. And I am here for the rental revolution. Victoria, for those who haven't been already, where can we find you?
So you can find us at www.hercollective.com or at the 4-letter Instagram handle at her, HUR.
Amazing. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we will be talking to Natasha Fernandez, founder of Roop and one of Selfridge's Bright New Things. Hello, Natasha. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm so excited to talk to you today. And I just wanted to start off with a little bit about your brand. As you know, earlier this month, you were named one of Selfridge's Bright New Things for Roop's low impact and earth conscious design. So if you could start by telling us a little bit about Roop and how it came about.
Roop is a brand that I started just over a year ago. I was working as a nanny and in a fabric shop, and I didn't have much in my life in the way of like creative outlets anymore. And I wanted to make a skirt out of a piece of fabric, but it was too small. So I made a bag, and then everyone else wanted the bag. So then I made them for everyone, and that's it. Basically, that's Roop.
I love that. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about your materials. Last year, we launched a trend that we called the secondary waste retail trend. And we launched this when we started to see designers, you know, keeping all of their materials in use rather than going to waste. And how is it you source materials, and how does this impact the products that you create as well?
So it was kind of like a happy accident in the beginning. So the fabric shop that I used to work for, they sell a lot of like dead stock, seconds, anything that's like too small to sell on the roll. So that is where I was just getting my fabric from, because I worked there and I had nowhere else to source from. And then kind of people were asking for more than one of a bag, and I was like, oh, sorry, you can't, because I only had enough for one. And then I just kind of saw this like love for the fact that they were like limited edition or completely one of a kind. So I was just like, well, I'm going to keep it this way. And then obviously, as I've grown, I've had to find larger pieces of fabric to be able to fulfill, you know, like big orders and the demand. So now I have somebody that helps me find large rolls of dead stock. But mainly, I'm just like the queen of eBay, and I still shop where I used to work as well. So that's how I find it. Yeah,
and
it's nice. It makes
stock. Sorry, you go.
It makes it just makes it really nice. Like when you find something that you know you'd like never gonna find again, and you make some really special ones. Like I just made some tortoiseshell print bags, and I like, it's heartbreaking that I'll never find this fabric again, but it makes the bags really special and unique. I love it.
Absolutely. And we've seen this even more recently now. You know, the use of dead stock is something that's become very topical, even in the last few months. The impacts of the pandemic drastically affected trade, and designers were just unable to buy and manufacture materials in the same way, and we started to see them being used more. But for you, what was the motivating factor behind that as you've grown, because you've been using them ever since you've launched?
I just wanted to keep the ethos behind Roop the same, and it's just, especially when I started to find when I found the supplier of the larger rolls that I buy, just the fact that there was so much, I was like, well, there's no point in like reverting to buying new fabrics or getting fabrics made, because there's like such a wealth of materials out there already that it just seems silly to not take advantage of them. So yeah, that's just like, it just didn't seem worth it to change the way that I do things, really.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about the way you do release your material, the way you do release your bags, because they sell out super quickly. And as you said, it's one of those things that you might not do the same print or the same material again. And in the last 5 years, the fashion calendar has been absolutely turned on its head. And increasingly, we're seeing the amount of collections that designers are releasing really stripped back. Do you produce your bags in collections, or is it led by what materials you can source?
So we do it every 2 weeks or so. We do a drop of bags, and they're kind of the colors are led by like the seasons, in terms of we'll do like warmer and paler colors when it's spring and summer, and now we're moving into autumn winter. We're doing like metallics and deeper shades, and then you kind of never know what you're going to get with like dead stock or remnants. So if I seem to be sourcing a lot of the same type of fabric, then I'll do a collection. And I also like to do it when I'm running out of imagery as well. So I did a picnic collection when I'd sourced a mass amount of gingham, and then I had loads of transparent and foil fabrics. So I did a sheer beauty collection. But really, it's just led by what people are asking me for, and what's doing really well. But yeah, we definitely don't do it in like strict or rigid collections. We just kind of do it as how we feel, really. I say
I love that it's I was going to say, I love that you're so hands-on and it's so led by like all of these handmade crafts. And it was another one of those things that we saw in lockdown, you know, whether it was making a banana bread or feeding a sourdough starter and making masks. We featured this in our DIY dressing trend after we saw designers like Christopher Rayburn showing us how to make bucket hats at home. And I really wanted to know if, looking ahead, is this something we could see Roop launch, like a DIY bag kit that you sew yourself, maybe?
Well, maybe not a bag, because I think it would be quite involved, but definitely a matching scrunchie could be really cute, because we keep all of our fabrics. If they're too small, they're currently in my "will get to you one day" pile. And then if it's big enough, if it's big enough for a scrunchie, that's like our like kind of waste buster method at the moment. We make them into scrunchies. So I think it could be a really nice idea to be able to get the materials to make a matching scrunchie to your bag, because that would be very
I love
cute.
that.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely.
I think I speak for us all when we can't wait to see what's next for Roop. Natasha, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been great talking to you. No
Thank you so
worries.
much.
And no worries. Thank you. And we will be taking a short 2-minute break now before we chat to Johnny O'Kane about his latest Prada collection available at Selfridges this month. Hello, Johnny. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am great. As I just said, you are the founder of Calais, and I think it would be great if you could just start about telling us a little bit about the brand you've built.
Yeah, so we're a store out of Birmingham. We've got one store currently on the way in Birmingham. We focus a lot around 90s to late 2000s vintage clothing. A lot of it surrounding a lot of branded wear. We do both men's and women's wear. And kind of put a focus on the history of the brands that we deal with is the main thing that we do. But we do also dabble occasionally in secondhand past season wear, so stuff that's a little bit more relevant today as well.
Love that. And you've recently just launched a pop-up in the corner shop at Selfridges. Can you explain a little bit behind the concept and the thinking behind it as well?
Yeah, so we got approached by Selfridges to bring some stock in for the Selfridges pop-up. And we thought we didn't really want to bring in the standard stuff that we typically deal with day to day. So we thought it would be nice to put a whole collection together of something that had a lot of history and past behind it. So we decided to focus on something that's very relevant today, which is Prada Sport, the Linea Rossa collection. So it started late 90s, around 97, 98. And then we decided to put together a collection of stuff between that period, so 97 to about mid 2000s. So just like monochrome red tab designed by Neil Barrett initially, and just tried to put a whole collection together of a variety of pieces. And yeah, we thought it would be something nice and special to bring in.
Of course, and we'll kind of come back to the vintage Prada concept later on. But I read recently that what you love about vintage fashion is that it's a great retaliation against the environmental crisis we're in, and I absolutely agree. And it offers consumers a chance to buy less from new. And I just wanted to know how you think that this mindset, is going to change how we all shop in the future.
I think, especially with big department stores like Selfridges, making a massive leap to incorporate it to attract their customer. I think it will change a lot of people's approach to the stigma that's around buying pre-worn, pre-owned clothing. I think obviously there is still a stigma there, a bad one or a negative one, towards buying secondhand clothing. But I feel like with stuff like Prada, which typically attracts a customer base that doesn't tend to go for secondhand clothing, I think when you can bring something to Selfridges like that, that is a nice clean cut collection where the quality is perfect, there's no marks, no stains or anything like that, I feel like it can change people's approach, especially to people that don't normally go online and search for secondhand clothing themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we said, like your collection at Reselfridges is entirely vintage Prada. And I mean, many of the brands that are sold on Collate are these super known luxury and streetwear brands. And do you think that it is possible for these so-called like hype brands and sustainability to go hand in hand?
Definitely. Yeah, I think so. I think if anything, I was speaking about this the other day, to be fair, I think any more hype that goes behind an item typically increases the value and increases the longevity in the item's lifespan. I think the more hype behind an item, the more value it holds, and subsequently means that people are less inclined to actually get rid of said item, throw it in the bin, waste it. Instead, people like to see a return on their initial financial investment. So makes people more inclined to sell stuff through secondhand platforms. And it also, I think, motivates people who can't maybe initially afford the hyped item when it is first brand new being sold in the stores. I feel like it can definitely attract custom from those people who can't afford it when it is secondhand and at a cheap price and still just as good as it was when it was brand new.
Of course. And what you're talking about here is also a more conscious approach to consumerism about, even if you can like invest in all of these stuff and kind of buy a lot, we're seeing that consumers aren't doing that, and even designers are following suit on that as a result of the pandemic. And even before that, we'd seen designers changing the frequency of their shows and going from creating 6 collections a year to now 2 collections, and some are even just producing 1. How else would you like to see fashion become more sustainable?
I think for me, it would be more based around transparency. I think there are a lot of brands, well, not a lot of brands currently, but there are a few brands currently, especially in the denim space, I think, because there's such focus around sustainability with that, with Nudie and Noah as well. I think there's a lot of transparency behind where the product comes from, how much waste they deal with, how much negative effects to the emissions and CO2 contributions they have, and how much they're trying to improve it. I think with luxury fashion houses and things like that, I feel like there is a tendency to be slightly secretive surrounding what they do behind the scenes and where they get their produce from and where they get their materials, etc. So I think a lot more transparency is needed with brands like that to make people more aware when they're buying, I think.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We spoke about this with Victoria as well, about this concept of greenwashing, and consumers are definitely awakening to that, and brands need to move past that and do need to be more transparent about that. And we've spoken a bit about sustainability and its value to shoppers, but I wondered if you could tell us more about how you communicate the value of vintage clothing to your customers, because as you said, it does have some negative connotations, and while people will buy new Prada, they wouldn't necessarily consider buying vintage or pre-loved clothing.
Yeah. Well, I think when things have a story and a history behind them, I think that the people are a lot more inclined to actually find out about what that history is and maybe get a little bit more involved in it. I feel like if there's a person that's buying Prada, for instance, in Selfridges now, especially the Lenny Ross collection, I think people, when it's accessible, will be a lot more inclined to find out about the history if there is a specific history behind it. So telling a story of where the item's been, or telling a story of how it came to be created, or where the different technologies were made, or what influenced it, anything of that sort, I feel like does influence, I don't know, it influences our customers, especially to be inclined to buy and to be inclined to invest into a second-hand piece as well as maybe the new one, or maybe instead of the new one.
Because I suppose in some way you're telling the same story as the designer was when they first created it, but you're also there's an in-between journey about where products have been since they were originally created. And like you said, with the Prada collection and a lot of the brands that you'll sell, some of them will have been created like years and years and years ago, and just they will have come into their own. Yeah, they will have come into their own now, and they've definitely changed.
Yeah, definitely. For example, we have a pair of fleece jogging bottoms that were brought into the store yesterday, that were purchased initially in 1998 from Elton John's Out of the Closet store. So they were Elton John's official jogging bottoms for a period of time.
Official jogging bottoms.
Official jogging bottoms worn by Elton John. But I think stuff like that, like little stories behind it, seeing the journey that the clothes go on, I personally think it makes it a lot more interesting, and it's definitely a conversation starter for anyone who wants to talk about their clothes when they're out and about.
Absolutely. And it is, the pre-loved and vintage market is just something we're seeing increase exponentially. So it definitely is a consumer trend that people are getting behind. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us. Before we let you go, you're at Selfridges in London at the moment. How long can we find you there for?
I'm there for the next 2.5 weeks, so till the 28th of this month.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Please keep an eye on the Selfridges website for more on Project Earth this week. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.